Look at this nonsense. My neighbor's wrench drawer is in sorry state here. We're gonna fix that. Okay, this is an absolutely stupid project, and I'm sure I'm gonna get people chirping me in the comments over it, but I don't care, because if you're a beginner, you're gonna learn a lot of really useful skills that you can apply to other projects down the road. The one thing in particular I'm going to show you is how to set up some stop blocks and a spacer block so you can make repetitive cuts so that you have very consistent spacing for these wrench organizers. I'm starting out with a lot more lumber than what you're going to need because I'm making some for my neighbor as well as myself. All you're going to need is about a 12-inch scrap out of your scrap bin that's about maybe 6.5 to 7.5 inches wide, and that's going to be enough in order to make 2 wrench organizers, one for your imperial wrenches and one for your metric ones. A really safe, easy way to break down your rough lumber is going to be to use a bandsaw, but if you don't have one, a jigsaw is going to work just fine, or you could use any handsaw. The board that I'm using is severely cupped as well as twisted, so I needed to flatten it a little bit before I ran it across the jointer, otherwise it just wouldn't stay stable enough. So here you're seeing me trying to find what would be the high spots that need to be planed down. And what I do is I search for the 2 corners that don't rock very much. I hold on to them, flip the board over, and then draw a line between the corners I was hanging on to. That indicates to me where I need to run the hand plane in order to get this board so that it sits relatively flat so it's not rocking, and then I can run it across that jointer and get it nice and flat. And you don't have to be perfect with your hand plane, just get it close and the jointer is going to do the rest. Obviously, we need to make those 2 faces parallel, so a few passes through my trusty 17-year-old DeWalt 735 will do the trick. In my experience, when I edge joint, I get much straighter edges when I take a heavier cut with the jointer, even on small boards. In order to get all my pieces the same length, I set a stop block up on my crosscut sled at 11 3/4. I simply squared off one end so that I could use that end up against my stop block, and then I just ran the pieces through. Even though this project's very straightforward, I did make a prototype, but I found it was a little bit too narrow to accomplish what I wanted to do, so I'm now making everything at 6.5 inches wide. Next up, we have a little game. You're going to mark one end at 2 1/4 and the other at 4 1/4. And the name of the game is... Anyone? Bueller? It's connect the dots. Time for a Nelles nugget. If you're making many copies of the same piece at a certain angle, save your offcut, and then you can use that set angle in order to run all your other pieces through without having to freehand it. All you have to do is set your fence up to the appropriate distance so that your blade lines up with the line. One thing you should know if you're new to woodworking is a bandsaw will not give you a nice smooth surface. So you're gonna have to flatten it or straighten it, and I just chose to use a jointer because it was handy, but you could use a hand plane if you wanted to. If you learn nothing else from this video, learn this. Spacer blocks are magic. It really helps with setup and to make consistent cuts over and over again. Here we're going to make one that's 5/8 of an inch thick so that we'll be able to evenly space all of the little slots for our wrenches. More on that shortly. In order to cut the slots for the wrenches, I set up my dado stack to 5/16 of an inch. Now, this is going to speed things up. You certainly don't have to use a dado stack, especially if you're just going to make a pair of these, but because I was doing a whole bunch, I found this was going to be a more efficient way to do it. You're probably going to want to watch this section a few times because this is how you get evenly spaced slots. I'm using 2 stop blocks. The one on your left is the one that I use to put the workpiece up against to actually cut the slot. During that cut, the one on your right does absolutely nothing. Once you've completed your cut, you're going to put the workpiece back up against the stop block on your left. Then you're going to slide the stop block on the right up against your workpiece. Then you're going to move the stop block on your left out of the way so you can put that magic spacer block in between your workpiece and the stop block on the right. Then you're going to once again slide that left stop block up against your workpiece and clamp it into place. Remove the spacer block and proceed to make your next cut. Rinse and repeat a few times to accommodate your widest wrenches. But don't cut too many this wide because you're going to want to change your dado stack to a bit of a narrower setting so that your wrenches don't fall over when they're in the slots. You want them to stand upright so you'll be able to read the measurements on them all. Eventually you're going to make it to the end of your workpiece and you won't be able to cut any more slots. But it's not quite time to pat yourself on the back and call it quits. You still have to finish it so that it looks good. My dado stack's pretty low quality, so I had a lot of chip out both along the length of the dado as well as at the exiting end. So I just took my Lie-Nielsen 5.5 and got rid of it all. When these wrench organizers are in use, I didn't want to cut my hand or catch it on any of the sharp edges at the top, so I just took a block plane and went around the perimeter. I did what would be the long grain first and the end grain second so that I didn't get more of that chip out like what I just removed with the hand plane. Now, if you don't have hand planes, you could certainly do all this with a random orbit sander. Look at this guy, he's just like a freaking kid at Christmas. He's got his wrench drawer all organized and now he knows where they all are. Until next time, go build something beautiful.